Paco, so good to see you again.
It's good to be
We're recording
here.
this here live at the Amplify Conference. Like to know what's your impression of the state of the gospel in North America?
I think I've seen two very big currents going on. One of them is I feel like there's a brand new, fresh desire to go back to ancient ways, and that's on one side. On the other side, I still do see a very nationalistic kind of flow of Christianity with many people throughout our country. Of course, that creates both problems, but also a good question of what really is the gospel. Is the gospel merged with the empire and the moves of the nation, or is the gospel beyond that?
Well, it's a good question. And is it? I guess is the question is, as we see the rise of nationalism in our country and elsewhere, what are the implications for people like you who are not a majority culture?
That's a good point. Jesus said to the disciples, asked Jesus, are you going to make Israel great again? And it was funny that Jesus almost looks like putting his hand on his forehead, saying,
"That's like Acts 1:6." You're
that's
paraphrasing, isn't it?
Acts
I recognize
1:6.
that.
Like,
yeah.
Are you going to give the kingdom back to Israel?
Yeah.
In other words, are we going backwards?
Yeah.
And I feel like people are coming into this country with the immigrants. I'm actually a pastor of an immigrant community, and as people flow into this country, they flow in with a brand new desire of finding life fresh. And one of the biggest questions that most people ask themselves in our neighborhood is, who am I really? And that's a question that is like a preparation for the gospel. And the second question is there a greater hand that can protect me, that can guide me, that I can... So they actually evaluate their old ways and their old religions, their old standards, their old faith. And I am seeing a fresh new faith, especially among people that I work with.
It seems that there's a growth among immigrant communities
Oh, yeah.
of gospel work, and so thankful for you. First of all, thankful you're here, thankful for immigrant communities that are here, and thankful for the work of the gospel. Talk to me about the last decade. Have you seen shifts and changes in our culture, or maybe your cultural context, in about how people are responsive to the gospel and how you share with them?
That's a good point. I would say a couple of things. I have seen that there's I actually was driving into a hotel, and I thought, I wonder if this is also going by the wayside. It's like a drive by Kmart and it's gone. It's like things are changing shiftly, and I think great big churches as the standard of what Christianity is, mega churches, I think is shifting. I think people are saying, well, what is the foundational about the gospel? And I think that's an important question that people are asking themselves. In regards to immigrants, immigration is actually coming to a kind of standstill. I don't know if I would say standstill, probably plateau or so. It's coming to a point where people are saying, I don't think going to America is the answer. And I think that changes that of course impacts our neighborhood. I'll give you a really quick example. I'm part of an English and Spanish speaking congregation, and it's a large congregation throughout the city, New Life Community Church. We had a men's retreat, and when we took all of our men on the retreat, we had an English track and a Spanish track. When the Spanish track moved and we went to another room, I realized that most people in their 20s are almost non-Spanish speaking. In other words, fresh, new, young immigrants are not coming, at least from Mexico. From Central America, they're still coming very much, but there's a lot less. The English-speaking side was very young, which of course that tells you a lot. Young, urban, hunger for Jesus.
Yeah.
On the other side, Latinos or Mexicans in the United States, there's a lot less.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
Young
You're
ones.
pastoring in urban, multicultural context. What encourages you today about the church? I'm going to ask you what discourages you.
Oh man, what encourages me a lot is the fresh fire that people have as they engage the gospel and realize that the gospel is not just a Sunday thing. I feel like people are awakening to the reality that the gospel touches every part of human society and living. And on the other side, just to answer your question about what discourages
yeah.
I feel like the coming to a head in many issues, conservative and liberal and biblical and non-biblical, and even the feel of what an immigrant is in this country, it's all coming to a head. It almost feels like there's waves that are coming once against another, and we will see how God will lead us to respond to each one of those questions.
Yeah, and I hope the Church of Jesus Christ will stand with sisters and brothers in churches like yours and show the love and solidarity that comes as brothers and sisters. So thankful for you. What have you found to be helpful in your congregation, helping them to embrace evangelism as a lifestyle?
Oh man, I feel like the first thing to think about is just going back to the Great Commission, and just instead of just saying, "Hey, there's a Great Commission," actually repeating it, praying it daily. It gives us an end to the power of Jesus. It gives us an end to all of the nations, and then it also reminds us that the beginning is baptism, and that we have been called to teach people, not just teach information, but teaching to obey. And finally, I would say this true realization that Jesus is present. In Spanish, it says, "And I will be with you always." And it almost sounds like, one day I'll be with you. But of course, it's a very clear promise. I'm with you right here, right now.
It's a good word. Last question.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to pastors and church leaders who are discouraged about the lack of enthusiasm for evangelism in their churches? Give them some advice.
I would say a couple of things that I don't think we need to pursue the culture in which one person does it all. I think Scott Chapman preached it this morning. It was right on. It was perfect. He mentioned that most people think that evangelism means I need to invite you to my church. And of course, there's an alternative that is better to church on Sunday mornings, which is sleeping in, Of course, people don't want to come to church. I want to sleep in. I want to go and watch games or something. And I don't think Christianity or evangelism is about bringing people to Sunday morning churches. I think evangelism is and has always been. Jesus said the harvest is ready. Jesus, I think evangelism has always been about bringing people to Christ right here and now.
And that awkward pause is the end of our interview. Thank you.